25 Most Terrifying Maniacs and Murderers in Human History. We are starting a series of publications about the most frightening and dark serial killers in human history. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next episode.
Part 1. Dunes Where the Wind Unties Knots. February 1969 on Cape Cod is when the ocean tightens into a steel ring and the sand howls like a living thing. Two young women friends who'd come to Provincetown for a quiet winter weekend drop out of the frame as if a light switch were flicked. A bus ticket window, a cheap boarding house, a steaming mug of coffee at the corner cafe, and then nothing. A door claps shut. The town is used to comings and goings. In season, it fills with everyone. Painters, students, drifters, musicians, those hunting for freedom, and those hunting the ones who are hunting for freedom. In winter, the ones who remain are locals, fishermen, shopkeepers, a couple of patrol officers, guys who repair boats and do carpentry for cash. One of them is Tony. For some, he's the quiet fix-it guy from the shop. For others, a nickname that will curdle later. Tony Chop Chop. Out in the dunes, where the world seems endlessly peaceful, the ground is already holding secrets. They're shallow, as if they wanted to be found. Part 2. A House Where Clocks Won't Start. Anton Charles Costa was born in Cambridge, Massachusetts, August 1944, in the last season of a great war, while America was relearning how to be happy. His childhood feels like a borrowed photo album. A mother, rented rooms, a city of train tracks and university towers. From early on, Tony has charm and light hands and a cool strip of air between words and deeds. Adolescence plants the first scar. At 17, he breaks into a home and attacks a teenage boy. The court does what courts often do with boys who make eye contact and sound plausible. Probation, supervision, the hopeful stamp. He'll straighten out. He marries, too young, as so often, has children. Then the new America of the 60s, pot, acid, pills, long hair, talk of expanding consciousness. In 1966, he rides west to California as if the country were one long road with a single bend. Then he comes back. Tony's hands are golden. He planes, he fixes, he rebuilds carburetors, hangs a shelf, changes a lock. He becomes that go-to guy who smiles, gives rides, shows you the side trail to the beach. The oddities multiply like late-day shadows, stolen drugs from a clinic, experiments with friends, brags about his garden in the woods, where people say more than flowers grow. In the summer of 1968, on an edge of Truro, he tends rows of marijuana and his own myth, the guy who knows where to go, whom to ask, what to try. Part 3. Girls Each with a Road That Won't Finish, Sydney Monzon, 19. A local from Eastham, a recent graduate with the surf-gray eyes of the Atlantic. In May 1968, she's seen in Provincetown, and then silence. In those months, police too easily trust the word ran away. The town whispers, you know how the kids are hitchhiking, music. The dunes keep their counsel. Susan Perry, 18, Provincetown born, as if woven from its winds. She vanishes over Labor Day weekend, 1968. The easy rhythm of the beach, salt on the skin, September making empty promises the way it always does. No one quite understands how September can promise too much. Patricia Walsh and Mary Ann Wysocki, 23. Rhode Island friends who arrive for a January 1969 weekend on a coast that feels safer because the cold drives villains indoors. A neighbor offers help with bags. Someone smiles in a hallway. Someone else offers a view of the real dunes. And then both are gone. Their families raise alarms immediately, and the searches begin, the kind that freeze fingers and burn hope. Part 4. How You Find What Refuses to Stay Lost. On February 8, 1969, the first horror turns up in Truro. A shallow grave, partial remains arranged with a fussy care, as if someone needed control, even in anatomy. It's Susan. Police pace out the dunes, drag wet sand, drive shovels into ground that winces. In March, they find parts of Mary Ann, Then Patricia, and beneath them, deeper, the rests of Sydney, one tragedy trying to hide another. The site is a sandy clearing once shown off for its crop. In the pocket of earth lie other people's bones, other people's fates, names layered like pages. In the brush, a torn Volkswagen manual bears fingerprints from someone who knows these trails and won't stop walking them. By now, rumors running hotter than the wood stoves. Trying to tame the press, the district attorney throws gasoline instead of water, speaking of hearts missing from graves, bite marks, and things worse than that. None of it is borne out. The words slip their cage and sprint across the continent. That's how legends are born, and how a jury can be nudged before it's ever sworn. Part 5. The garden in his head, the garden in the woods. Tony smiles like men who feel untouchable smile. He loops police in circles, shows up to talk on his own, plays the helpful guy who knows the scene, a tip about acid here, a sighting there. The era gives him a discount. Late 60s, everything molten, unstructured, casual. They probably took off hitchhiking, music, the whole thing, one person says. They'll come back, says another. They always do. The clock bleeds out, not days, but the hours that might have saved someone. His charm and his role as a quasi-informant keep him perilously close to the investigation's pulse. Later writers will call that one of the age's chief mistakes. In his head, he drafts a novel he'll finish in prison. Resurrection. In it, a figure named Carl fires the shots, while the narrator helps, puts them out of their misery, only buries. The book is a mirror smashed into shards. Which pieces are truth, which are narcotic fog, which are cold excuses? Hard to say. The structure is plain, though. He despises randomness, hates mess, needs everything to stay where he put it, including people. Part 6. How You Catch Men Who Believe They Can't Be Caught. On March 6, 1969, Tony is arrested and charged. In April, a grand jury hands up indictments. The case is built from a relief map of circumstance and object, a line of contact with each disappearance, his knowledge of the Truro clearings where he tended pot and where graves were found, the paper trail with his touch, witnesses whose statements align like fence posts. Trial begins in 1970. The defense leans hard on insanity blackout. Psychiatrists talk of personality disorder, the toxic bite of drugs, fogs, gaps. The prosecution answers with the mechanics, shots to head and neck, pattern and repetition, and the deliberate work on the bodies afterward, behavior not of a man losing control but of one enforcing it. The jury agrees. 2 life sentences for Patricia Walsh and Mary Ann Wysocki. Appeals follow. The verdicts stand. Who killed Susan Perry and Sydney Monzon? Formally, no convictions. But the archaeology of the graves layered, familiar, insistent, is a signature the sands couldn't erase. One of the cruelties of the era was legal caution that left some truths to travel with the dead. Part 7. A trial conducted in a crowd. The trial ran not only in a courtroom, but on sidewalks, in headlines, at coffee counters where breath steamed in the February air. Those early lurid comments from the DA did damage that's hard to wash out. Legend leaked into evidence. Emotion intruded where surgery was required. The judge eventually damned the rumors, but the word cannibalism had already been launched. It wasn't true. False narrative is a tax the innocent pay as well as the guilty. Real brutality gets diluted by invented spectacle. Another failure, the inertia of the first hours. In the late 60s, police too often read missing young women through the lens of freedom of movement rather than imminent risk. Calls were made days or weeks later, after footprints had blown shut. It's not an indictment of single officers so much as a diagnosis of the culture. But culture doesn't erase responsibility. Later chroniclers would name the blindness for what it was, and note that Tony's posture as a useful contact let him sit too near the switchboard of the case. A third knot. The courtroom borders of psychiatry. Experts split from disordered but sane to substantially unable to conform to law. The jury chose the former. On appeal, Massachusetts High Court agreed. The sequence of preparation and execution showed deliberation. Intoxication and obsession didn't meet the standard of legal insanity. The line between evil and illness is the line courts are forced to draw with human hands. Part 8. Psychological profile. The anatomy of cold. Certain markers are as recognizable to a forensic psychologist as a rash to a clinician. Tony's map includes early aggression, the home invasion assault at 17, escalation from assault to murder, objectification, women as things to be arranged even after, ritual around the dead that serves no purpose of concealment or mercy but does serve his inner order. Running alongside is polysubstance use, marijuana, LSD, opiates. Drugs don't create a predator. They dissolve brakes on a personality already leaning downhill. Add social camouflage, the charming neighborhood handyman, sometimes even a summer babysitter for acquaintances' children, and you get the textbook silhouette of a functioning predator. Someone who wraps victims in trust and the town in usefulness. Finally, there's the compulsive need for control. The garden in the woods mirrors the garden in his mind, spacing trees just so, laying stones so that moss grows in lines, demanding the same from human arrangements. The dead are commanded to lie where he says. Even their names should be silent if he buries them deep enough. This isn't rage, it's refrigeration. Part 9, a chronology drawn like a dune map, November 1961. First recorded violent episode, break-in and assault on a teenage boy. Probation, supervision, 1963-1966. Marriage, children, rising drug use, drift into the 60s edges. 1966. West of California, the Hitchhiker's America, the Circle of Hippies. Return to Cape Cod. May 1968. Sydney Monzon disappears. September 1968. Susan Perry disappears. January 1969. Patricia Walsh and Mary Ann Wysocki arrive for a winter weekend and vanish. February 8, 1969. Searchers uncover Susan's remains in the Truro woods. March 1969. Parts of Mary Ann and Patricia are found. Beneath them, Sydney, March 6, 1969. Arrest, April 1969. Indictments for 2 murders. May 1970. Verdict, guilty of murder in the first degree for Walsh and Wysocki. 2 life terms. 1971. Commonwealth versus Costa on appeal. Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court upholds the convictions and rejects the insanity defense. May 12, 1974. Death in custody at Massachusetts Correctional Institution Walpole, officially ruled a suicide. Part 10. How he was caught. Not by hunch, but by line nothing. Mystical solved the case. Patience did. Troopers and local officers stitched together the things Tony assumed would never live in the same file. The people and the places, the torn Volkswagen paper bearing his touch, the garden he liked to boast about, the witness accounts and his conduct before and after the disappearances. They didn't find him because he slipped. They found him because he was everywhere in each episode, at each knot. When you align distances, times, and connections, story becomes structure. Ballistics and wound patterns pointed to close. Repeated shots. The post-mortem staging pointed to ritual. First came the juror's shock, then the colder clarity that follows. This wasn't a man taken by a wave, but one who knew tides and planned around them. Part 11. Court, theater, and an anatomical theater. The trial felt the pressure not only of facts, but of the music playing outside. The DA's early flamboyance, those untrue details, was a public error. They were later disavowed, but the glass had already cracked. Even so, the backbone of the case wasn't rumor. It was the sort of thing you can set on the table. Contacts, bullets, places, prints, patterns. The defense urged jurors to see a man broken by chemicals. The prosecution urged them to see a man who used chemicals as tools. The latter prevailed. On review in 1971, the High Court went point by point, from the rejection of insanity to the refusal of a lesser-included, non-premeditated charge. A simple truth sits beneath the footnotes. Many straws of circumstantial proof, if they bend in the same direction, make a rope. Costa stayed where the jury put him. Part 12. Errors and the lessons they cost. 1. Public hyperbole. Those early statements about missing hearts and bite marks seeded sensation and then, naturally, counter-theories. They weren't supported by the record. That sort of talk isn't just bad PR. It adulterates how a community and a jury perceive evidence. Headlines are lighter than truth. Only truth endures. 2. Slow first hours. In 1968-1969, too many disappearances of young women were read as mobility rather than danger. Families were left shouting into wind. The historical lesson is dull and vital. It's better to overreact than to underreact when the window for rescue is measured in hours. 3. Blurred roles. Treating a suspect as a semi-informant buys access to a subculture, but grants a manipulator access to you. That doesn't mean police covered for him. It means procedure must be stronger than personality and era. To be fair, in the decisive phase, the investigation was patient, methodical, and built a case stout enough to carry verdicts through appeal. Part 13. What came after? Books, shadows, closed doors. After sentencing, Tony finished the manuscript he'd been drafting, where Carl fires and he merely helps. He argued with the world and with himself, believing perhaps that text could overwrite reality. Writers and journalists kept the case alive. Magazines, then true crime volumes and novels, then documentaries. Kurt Vonnegut wrote an essay about how monsters can mimic virtue. Norman Mailer cast a novel-long shadow over Cape Cod's underbrush. Decades later, Casey Sherman revisited the archives and the rough theater of masculinity that let a handyman pass. And a child from those summers, Liza Rodman, returned as an adult to write a memoir about the smiling sitter she once knew and the murderer she later read about. In 1974, not yet 30, Costa died in his cell. Officially, suicide. Unofficially, another door that opens only inward. Part 14. Every name, one by one. Sydney. Lee Monzon, 19. Easton Provincetown. Missing May, 1968. Found March 1969 beneath later burials in the Truro woods. Susan Sue, Perry, 18. Provincetown. Missing Labor Day weekend, 1968. Found February 8, 1969. Patricia, Pat, Walsh, 23. A winter visitor in January 1969. Found March 1969. One of 2 murders for which Costa was convicted. Mary Ann Wysocki, 23. Patricia's friend. Found March 1969. The second murder of conviction. Note on spelling. Contemporary sources vary between Sydney, and Mary Ann. I've used the most frequent modern renderings. Part 15. What to do with such truth stories like this are often cemented with a single moral. A monster and a town. Here there are 2. The first concerns the predator. He doesn't fall from the sky. He grows from little permissions, not seeing, not acting, not naming. His biography is slick with the things we excuse. He's young, he experimented, he works hard, he helps. Between well, maybe and but no, a life can disappear. The second concerns the town. Cape Cod weathered this blow like it weathers winter storms. Right off the damaged boats, mend the pilings, screw a new no trespassing sign to the post. Storms leave a message behind. Reaction speed and speech hygiene. Move fast and say only what you can prove. 2 rules that protect not only truth, but the people digging toward it with a shovel in their hands. Part 16. A half-documentary epilogue. The voice of the dunes. Picture a February morning. The air tastes of iron and salt. Snow licks away prints like a dog cleaning a wound. 4 names lie in the earth, and a town that doesn't yet know how to speak them, because every phrase feels either too loud or too faint. Somewhere a boy fixes a birdhouse. A woman darns a torn sleeve. Fishermen argue the price of cod. Life fogs the pier until the pier seems to vanish. This story is not about graphic detail. It's about ordinary cold. A smile that means nothing. Trust that was abused. A delay that cost too much. And about how a small place at the continent's edge learned to pronounce the names of people someone tried to turn into nobody.